Hello, I'm Chris. Welcome to Warrior. Very glad you're here. Significant discussion today, drone warfare. The Pentagon is very much zeroed in on drone warfare and drone threats. The Army is all over this. They are practicing drone warfare with wargaming, with red teaming in Europe with a special, very elite brigade, the 173rd Airborne Brigade. You probably heard of them from their famous missions during the Iraq War and OIF. We have three distinguished members of that brigade. They are an elite group of paratroopers. We have CW2 Daniel Rumbach, First Lieutenant Rhett Perry, and we have CW2 Andrew Tuppets. We want to thank all three of these Americans, these airborne paratroopers, for joining us today to talk about drone warfare. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Absolutely. Thank you for having us.
Really appreciate you being here. Let's give me a sense of the red teaming. Give me a sense of the OP4. Give me a sense of the wargaming you guys are doing. Some of the scenarios that you're doing to prepare for future drone warfare.
When it comes to the red team, we have a great relationship with our 1-4 Infantry Battalion that's down at Hohenfels, the Joint Multinational Training Center. And they've been doing a really great job working with us and sometimes against us when we have to play on integrating drones at echelon, specifically sending small teams out with first-person view drones or with short-range reconnaissance systems to help shape how the battlefield or how the battle's fought from the Blue Force side as they're working their way through that terrain.
And let's ask Lieutenant Rhett Perry, what are some of the scenarios that you're running through, whether it's drone reconnaissance, drone attack, networking, various kinds of scouting?
So our platoon typically conducts long-range reconnaissance and assists in training others, the infantrymen, to conduct short-range reconnaissance. We also have the capability to conduct short and long-range attack with drones, specifically using first-person view drones that are either controlled by radio frequencies or by fiber optic cables. We also conduct missions with drone bombing at longer or shorter ranges, where we drop things like grenades on an enemy.
Excellent. CW2 Andrew Toppets, if you could talk a little bit about that. What kinds of drones are you using? Small, commercial, handheld? I imagine commercially available, ones that are specific to the Army. What are some of the drones being used?
Yeah, a lot of smaller drones right now, mostly reconnaissance related, stabilized platforms, meaning, you can just take a day or two to train somebody up on them. The drones fly themselves for the most part. They can get that employed quickly. We also train people on first-person view drones, which tend to be a lot more manually operated, take quite a bit more to operate, and require a lot more training.
We hear a lot of discussion about soldier as a system, kind of dismounted reconnaissance, the idea of being on the move with ISR. To what extent is this networked through an RF kind of frequency? I was really interested, you mentioned fiber optic cable, because that's a way to operate an unmanned system without emitting a signature, right? Tell me a little bit about some of those scenarios.
So we operate internal to our platoon, both drones operated through radio frequencies, and then we're starting to increase our capability with fiber optic cables. For the most part, the soldiers that we train, as the infantrymen that we train and push down to the lower tactical level, are operating drones that are operated with radio frequencies. And thus far, all of the drones controlled with fiber optic cables, the ones that are longer range attack drones for FPVs, we operate within the platoon.
Excellent. What are some of the key takeaways, things that you're learning initially about maneuver formations, moving to contact with small drones, and then what kind of latency are you getting in terms of connectivity, the networking, the drone, and then the handheld command and control?
I would say we have a very unique terrain set here, especially in the area of Germany we're in. Hilly terrain with a lot of trees. So we do deal with a lot of finding shortcomings when it comes to advertised RF distances or trying to work through those by developing repeater antennas or kind of ways to help extend our ranging as we're working on them.
10-4. What kind of a op force scenario are you against, and what kinds of formations? Are they dismounted squads? Are they network units? Is there air ground coordination? What are some of those specifics?
I would say there's a myriad of them. They'll build scenarios in where they move as like a small special purpose forces team, moving with just civilian vehicles, sometimes as an augmentee with a short range or medium range reconnaissance platform that's built into a mounted force as they're moving forward, or they'll be inlaid into an urban environment and then be able to employ from various hide sites in actual buildings.
Sure. And what kinds of targeting is taking place? Is it primarily EOIR? Do you have some EW emissions? What are some of the transport layers being used to affect these missions?
Pretty much everything is EOIR right now. We do a decent amount of mixing with our ground reconnaissance as well, and try and maintain clear communications as well so that we can cue each other, but primarily EOIR.
Are there ways you can harden the signature and share information, network them kind of node to node?
That depends on system to system for the most part. There is no one easy button to press for that solution. So we get a new system, we have to work that avenue to make sure that link is there.
First Lieutenant Perry, what is an example of, say, a combat scenario that you've been employing these drones in, and what are some of the lessons you learned? That can work for all three of you.
So in previous exercises where Hawkeye Platoon has employed some of these capabilities, oftentimes, as Chief Toppitz mentioned, we will receive intelligence from a ground reconnaissance force, or we will collect the intelligence with ISR, and then whether it be an armored target, air defense, or a ground maneuver force from the enemy or the adversary, and then we will go through the fires process to the artillery or to some sort of FPV strike or another form of effects on the enemy. In a bunch of different scenarios it could be, but collecting intelligence through any means, to include reconnaissance from us, and then using a deliberate fire chain to affect the enemy with some sort of targeting.
I'm glad you mentioned that. You were anticipating one step ahead of what I was thinking to ask about, which is the question of fire control, sensor to shooter pairing. What are you learning about finding a target, doing that target verification, and then the alignment with fire control to, as you mentioned, bring the effects upon the enemy?
I would say we definitely have to make sure we're training our people properly and doing the best we can to make sure they can identify things themselves. Speaking to the fires process as a whole, that doesn't necessarily mean you're always going straight up the chain. Maybe if your person is trained properly and is able to identify something properly, there's planning that already happened previously that allows you to just prosecute right there with an FPV to hopefully streamline that chain.
What are some of the scenarios that you're seeing, and how well is that working, and what are you learning about it?
I would say that scenario might look like our reconnaissance platform is up in the air scanning a named area of interest for a certain amount of time. They know what the high payoff target list is. They know what fires are associated with different targets. So if they identify a specific target, they know whether or not that needs to go higher up the chain of command or whether or not it can be executed within their own chain of command. So if it's something within their own chain of command, then maybe they're just calling to the next team over and they can put up a drone that can go drop a grenade on them or fly an FPV into something.
Roger that. Well, what about dual use kinds of drones? We hear a lot about things like the switchblades in Ukraine, for example, have decimated Russian T-90s to a large extent. Are there drones which themselves are munitions, and how are those factoring into your training?
That's been a large part of our experimentation, especially with our first-person view drones. We do have essentially a kinetic built-in drone that would strike similar to what you would see in a lot of the videos that come out of Ukraine. There's been a lot of work and process to integrate those into our training aspects, and especially to determine where and at kind of what level release authority they would be utilized at in that fire's mission chains.
10-4, roger that. What about drone swarms? Do you operate mini drone swarms in some way to blanket an area with ISR, perhaps test an area's air defenses, or even perhaps launch attacks when directed by a human?
We tend to try and steer away from the word swarming, because to us that means that we're going back to, that whole one ground control station is operating multiple aircraft at a time. So we try and use the term massing, where you might have multiple operators operating multiple drones all at the same time to try and overwhelm your enemy.
And this is what I meant to get at before in terms of hardening the drones. A lot of countermeasures use EW to try and jam the RF signature. That's one reason why, from what I understand, fiber optics can be useful to kind of harden against that or prevent jamming. Is there kinds of frequency hopping or other techniques that these drones can use to avoid being jammed and still get to their target or conduct their mission?
We'll see some commercial systems will have some elements of hardening, but in a lot of our training, we also work to identify when your system is being jammed, kind of what those indicators would be of moving into a jamming environment, and then how best to work to either navigate to clear it and return to base, or clear it and move forward. So it's been a lot of techniques training on how to survive in an EW environment, whereas just in elements where we have systems that don't have that type of hardening.
That's excellent. So you're practicing the tactics to adjust to and respond to a potential jamming scenario.
Correct, yes.
That's excellent. That makes a lot of sense. What about target verification? If you have a loitering drone, a forward drone, and perhaps there's an urban area, you want to make that discernment between a civilian population and a specific military target with the EOIR, with the target database, you're able to do that very effectively. Tell me an example of that.
I think a lot of that goes into the training of our operators on identifying enemy equipment and being able to discern the difference between civilian equipment or civilian personnel and enemy uniforms, enemy vehicles, or other enemy capabilities, so that they can send accurate reports to higher.
10-4. Now, is there automated aided target recognition?
I would say that ties into the trying to integrate AI onto our platforms for that, split-second decision making. Also something that we're working on, but nothing is fully fleshed out that we're using.
Excellent, excellent. What am I missing here, gentlemen? Airborne Rangers right here. Well, wait a minute, I'll edit that out. 173rd Airborne Brigade. What am I missing here, gentlemen? That's a dumb question. I'll edit around this. Is there an example of an individual scenario where drones made a difference as far as closing with an enemy, identifying a target, maneuvering into position, essentially achieving a mission objective?
I would say that we have a pretty good example from a training event this past year, where it was a battalion situational training exercise. Each company had its own lane. We were tasked to be the opposing force for one of those lanes. And for each battalion that went through this exercise, we were able to completely stop that company in its tracks with our small, I would say 15-person element, where we're just doing persistent reconnaissance, or as persistent as it could be, weather dependent, and then identifying where that company was at to employ droppers and employ one-way attack FPV drones.
Last question, because gosh, we could talk forever about this. What about networked or layered targeting? Can you have a drone at one altitude, perhaps even a medium altitude drone, or a node over the other side of a mountain, kind of being congruous, sharing information in that way?
Are you asking if we can fly drones in layers and those drones are communicating together, or
Yes.
if we're just flying it? I wouldn't say that's necessarily something that we do. We do layer our capabilities, and then we kind of do the integration ourselves on the backside.
First Lieutenant Perry, what's one of the main things that you're taking from this training?
I think something that I have taken away is the importance of taking the subject matter expertise from our organization and sharing that knowledge with people from a broader audience that don't come from a UAS background, and enabling them to become the operators themselves and the subject matter experts within their own formations, so that they become a drone operator that we can rely on, and that their individual companies and battalions can rely on to conduct reconnaissance or one-way attack. And I think that's been very impactful for us, and learning that has been impactful for me.
And CW Daniel Rumbuck, you made some interesting comments about dual use or attack drones, drones in lethality. What are you learning? What are some things you're taking away as far as making those identifications and affecting those kinds of attacks?
Well, I would say we are very uniquely postured with where we work with and who we work with. You know, the sister organizations we have up here working alongside the 173rd have been able to really evolve and in a lot of ways help write what the future Army doctrine for unmanned systems is going to be. You know, this is all untrodden ground when it comes to what we have a doctrinal basis in. So getting that opportunity to really work together with everybody out here and define that and help assist really at the Army level and realistically the Department of War level has been quite an adventure.
Excellent. One of the things one of my heroes said that I paid attention to years ago was a former commander of Army Futures Command, who said emerging technologies change maneuver formations. As on the ground against an OPFOR doing a red team, are you seeing that? Are you seeing how new technologies inspire new tactics, train to accommodate new kinds of techniques and adaptations for combat? I'd love each of your thought on that.
We've absolutely seen that, you know, over the last fiscal year of the changes of the red teaming down at the JMRC in Hohenfels, and watching maneuver units come through and attempt to penetrate even what is, you know, would be considered a pretty small drone team out there, and watching how the tactics have to change. You know, we've seen it even with playing Red 4 in our own formations, how just a small element of something just so vastly beyond the pale of what we've previously worked with has caused really a reworking in how we employ our maneuver elements.
Excellent. CW2 Daniel Rumba, First Lieutenant Rhett Perry, and CW2 Andrew Tuppets, all three of you, 173rd Airborne Brigade. Excellent Americans. Thank you so much for your time and expertise for this series, helping people understand how the Army and its sister brother services are prepared for tomorrow's fight. Thanks for your time.
Thank you for having us.